This video is brought to you by ArchiTech Network and our online platform of courses where you can learn from world-class architects working in some of the practices that you can see in these videos. You can learn Grasshopper, Revit, Rhino Inside, Twinmotion, and some of our new courses on AI, and lots more courses that we're delivering over the next year. So please, if you like this video, check out our courses in the link below so we can keep bringing you more content like this.
What's up, guys, and welcome back to another ArchiTech tour. We are here in our Copenhagen trip, and of course we cannot come to Denmark and Copenhagen without stopping by my old firm, BIG, and we're here with a very special tour in their headquarters. This is also a special tour because there's been very few tours inside the office. They've literally just finished construction. They're even putting some finishing touches here and there, but they've allowed us in to show you guys around the space. And we'll also be talking with Jens Kaarsholm, who's the Director of Design Technology here in BIG. And he's going to be talking to us a little bit about what they're doing here in Copenhagen, what they're working on in terms of BIM, AI, game engines, and all this kind of stuff. So it should be pretty cool. I've only seen the office at the party, so I'm pretty cool to see it in daytime with everything kind of finished. So this one should be pretty special. So let's go on in and take a look. Alright guys, we are here inside the BIG headquarters with Jens. This is Jens Kaarsholm, the Director of Design Technology here at BIG.
Yep.
I had the pleasure of working with Jens for 5.5 years since I've been at BIG. We both joined...
It's kind of crazy, yeah.
Around the same time, 2018, right?
Yep.
And yeah, it's been an awesome time. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure.
It's cool. I've never seen it outside of the party.
Yeah, you were here for the opening party.
Yeah. So it's cool to see it in real life.
That's nice.
But maybe give the audience a bit of an overview. How many BIGsters are we right now? How many do we have in Copenhagen? And when did you move in?
We're roughly 350 people in Copenhagen, and we moved in September last year. And we're, you know, as with everything, you need a little sort of time to settle in. But I think we're really getting there now, where it really starts to feel like our new base and home completely, and everything is up and running and so on. So it's super nice. So
it's a big space, so you need to
really happy with it.
Break it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's take a look around. We got a lot of real estate to cover.
A lot of space to cover.
So we got 6 floors.
6 floors. Yep.
Yeah. And we can walk inside.
You can actually, over here in a minute, you can actually look all the way up to the top. We have this one spot right here where you can actually see through all the way to the very top of the building. Because when you stand here, it does look a little bit like the atrium only goes to the 3rd floor. But there is actually this one spot where you can see through to the 6th floor. So it is a continuous sort of open space all the way to the very top.
And the DT team are up there. So
we're sitting on the 5th floor.
So you can shout down when you see someone destroying your Revit model. Okay. We have some epic models here, and I think even though I'm familiar with a lot of the products, it's really cool to see. Some of these models I've not seen before. But yeah, talk us through this one. This is quite a famous
yeah, this is the project we have up in Norway called the Twist, or the Kistefoss Museum, which was supposed to be an extension to the original museum that also has a sculpture park to it. But we convinced the client to build a bridge instead and connect the sculpture park in a different way, or a better way, whilst sort of also creating that extension. And at the same time, we also sort of created a sculpture in itself. So instead of ticking 1 box, we actually ticked 3 boxes with this project. And it's a project we're really happy with, and I think it's also just shows sort of like how complex things can be, but yet in a very simplistic manner.
Yeah.
And
also a great kind of computational projects, right?
Absolutely.
I've seen a lot of people try and copy this online.
Oh yes.
And they never quite get some of the details of it, but it's a really nice
There
example.
was a lot of computational design going into this, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's one of those ones, for example, that because it's built in these little strips, this model doesn't show, right? And it means that...
Yeah, true. This model almost looks like it has this smooth surface, but actually the built one has almost like these rectangles that twists or turns ever so slightly. That gives it the complex and organic shape, but it's actually still fairly rational.
Yeah, still flat material, and you can build it.
Yep. little bit of a smaller model, but we have the NOMA, project, which is also a super nice one, with a lot of how to say it's actually a sort of a refurbishment of an old army ammunition depot, or how to say like a storage for ammunition. So we reconfigured that and made it into a restaurant that I guess most people know about by now.
Yeah, so, very famous restaurant.
It's a great project, I think.
Beautiful small-scale project, actually.
Yeah,
big,
exactly.
right? You don't see as much of us.
And there's a lot of really, really beautiful details in this one in particular. It's you know, definitely a recommendation to go and see.
It's only going to be around for a bit longer.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
If you're visiting Copenhagen,
I think they're staying out there, but they're just redoing the concept. But I'm not into the finer details of it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool.
And over here we have the Copenhill project.
Yeah, the famous
ski slope.
Yeah.
The
we'll try and walk up this tomorrow.
Sorry?
We're going to try and walk up this tomorrow.
Oh yeah, great. We should do that for sure. Yeah, so you can essentially walk all the way up here and hike to the very top and look out over Copenhagen, and then make your way down again, or you can, for that matter, ski down again if you wanted to. You could also climb up on the side here. This is the world's tallest climbing wall. And then, as mentioned before, it's also the cleanest waste-to-energy plant on the planet. So, so it's a great combination of things in one building. And
have you skied down it yet?
I've skied down it, and we had both at the opening, but also we had a Christmas party out there where I skied down in these 60s, 70s skis.
That was a
super rusty. I didn't do the edges before, so I came down a little too fast. I couldn't actually brake in the end. So I used to be a ski guide in the Alps.
Actually, maybe explain to the audience like the big parties, the summer party, the winter party. I don't think I touched on that. Like,
I mean, we do have some really good parties for sure here. It's and we always do costume parties with a theme.
You have to dress up.
You have to dress up. It's mandatory. And obviously some do it more than others, but it's just a great thing and a great tradition. And obviously in this case, when Copenhill opened, we combined it with a ski after ski theme. So we always try to do the summer party and Christmas party in relation to a project that just completed, or something that we won, or something. So there's typically a connection between the theme and the party.
There's a cool location.
Sorry, a theme and a building.
Cool location, a theme, and fancy dress is a must.
Yes.
Of course, we can't come to big and Copenhagen without talking about Lego.
Nope.
And I mean, this is a infamous model that was like part of Yes is More. I actually think this is the first time I've seen it in person.
Right. Okay.
It's incredible.
And it used to be in our Nørrebro office before we moved to Valby, where we used to be before being at the headquarters here.
In the Carlsberg one.
Yeah, we used to be at the Carlsberg area prior to this building, or to this place. But before the Carlsberg area, we were in Nørrebro in Copenhagen, in a smaller office, before Big became international, or it was back when we only had one office in the early days. And this model used to be there, it was built there. And I think everyone is just super happy that Bjarke and the partners decided to bring this along and keep it. It was falling a little bit apart out in Valby when we were still there, and it was getting to a point where people, I think, started to doubt whether it would actually sort of survive and make it. But I think everyone is super happy that we brought it with us. And essentially, what Bjarke did was he managed to get a Lego builder to come, like a professional Lego builder, to come and spend a month full time rebuilding the model. He hasn't completely taken everything apart, but a lot of the bricks, especially on the outside, has been taken off and dusted off and cleaned and put back together, and it's now in a much better condition. Obviously, the tricky part was that a lot of the bricks, back when it was originally built, were glued together. So that gave a few
that's the secret of Lego building.
Challenges for this builder to overcome. But I think it's so great to have it here, and I think it's Personally, I'm a big Lego fan, so,
Yeah.
so
I think every architect
you
is
know,
a bit of a Lego fan.
I always love to come
And
down and
An
look at it.
architect working at big, I assume, is a super Lego fan.
Yeah.
We've actually have like maybe a little bit of a side story on. There's like a group of Lego master builders that build a lot of the big buildings,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And there was even an intern, I forget his name, but he's got an Instagram account.
It's called Nicholas Big Brick or
Big
something
Brick,
like that.
yeah. Check out Big Brick.
Big Brick, and he's called Nicholas Carlier.
That was right.
And he actually did. You guys should film that later on, close up. But he actually made a leaving gift for Big when he left, where he made a small little miniature postcard model in Lego of the headquarters that sits over the reception area.
Oh wow!
That came with instructions and a custom box and everything.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I remember. And at form giving, there was a whole room of Lego big buildings, which is pretty cool. That was like a childhood dream walking into that room.
And then we designed the Lego house in Billund as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of connections to
There's
Lego
a lot of
for
Lego
sure.
stuff.
Yeah.
So we are literally standing here.
Yeah. It's one of the early models of the headquarters. So you can see there's a few changes. We no longer have a basement in the building, and there's also a slight change to a few other things. But overall, it's more or less what you have here and what you have here in many ways.
So we're standing here right now, looking up.
And the railings of the stair has changed a little bit, but like overall, it's more or less as is. So
yeah, we're gonna take a walk up, floor by floor, and make it to the.
We'll end up here on the roof terrace, and then we'll make our way down the outside emergency stair in the very end.
It's April right now in Denmark. It's sunny but still chilly.
It's very chilly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the project here is a project we're doing in Aarhus in Denmark, down on the harbour front. Project called Ø4 or the Island 4. Where we essentially it initially started out with this residential building in the very sort of end of the pier, and I think what's interesting about this master plan of different buildings here is that this project here was designed in ArchiCAD when we were still in ArchiCAD here in Copenhagen. We'll come back to that when we talk later, but for a few years we were doing ArchiCAD. So this building is done fully in ArchiCAD. The same goes for the theater here in the front, and also these small boathouses. And then sort of as you walk down the master plan, this is also marking the point in time where we switched between ArchiCAD to Revit. So the clock tower here in the middle was actually done in ArchiCAD in SD, and also into DD, and the team actually more or less did a full DD set. And then the client decided to put the project on pause for a couple of years to wait for these two neighboring buildings that are not done by us, but they share the same basement, so we had to sort of wait for these projects to get up to the same timeline. And then the question was, because at that point in time we had already decided to switch away from ArchiCAD and back to Revit. And then the question was, do we wait and see and hope that we will have people in 2 years' time that can draw in ArchiCAD, or do we ditch completely what we did and remodel and redraw everything? And we ended up taking the very bold decision to actually scrap the entire DD set and ask the team to redraw and remodel the entire thing from the ground up.
You've given a few cool presentations on that.
Yeah, I've been talking about it in the past as well, but luckily the team had a big yes hat on, and we managed to actually get back up to speed in 2 to 3 weeks' time, which was super good. And now we're working on this hotel at the very end, which has been quite a few years in the making, but it's now coming along and it's coming out of the ground. And this one is now done 100% in Revit. So there's just a nice transition here of our different tools.
ArchiCAD, Revit transition.
Yes.
And Revit.
Revit, yes. All right, so just quickly about the building here. So we've obviously made most of it out of cast-in-place concrete. And we use this new concrete called Future 7, which is 30% or has a 30% less of a carbon footprint than traditional concrete. It also has a little bit of a warm glow to it, given that there's more clay in the mix, which actually makes it look really nice and a bit warmer. And then we have only one column in the entire project, which is the what we typically refer to as the Totem Pole, which is made out of natural stone. Initially, we had the stone sorted by color because there's a different type of stone on each floor. But we also did all the engineering ourselves in-house. So at some point, we got the engineers on board, and they were realizing that maybe we shouldn't sort them by color and sort them by density instead. So now we have Norwegian granite in the bottom and another granite on the next floor. And then as we go up, they will get less dense, hence we have marble on the top floor.
I didn't know that.
And obviously, given that it's natural stone, and natural stone can be fairly unpredictable in terms of there can be air bubbles or cracks and other things, so it's obviously also not a material that engineers likes necessarily.
Yeah.
Or like
Unpredictable.
it's a little bit unpredictable, so we've obviously had to ultra scan and ultrasound scan these to make sure that there weren't any issues. But yeah, the whole principle is that we only have one column, and then obviously you could say the connections between the mega beams also serves as a column in itself. You could say. But it gives us these really beautiful long spans on many of the floors, and then there's also a few engineering, you could say, tricks or things that we've incorporated that almost creates these optical illusions. I'll get back to that in a second when we get upstairs, but there's some nice little tricks here and there.
Hanging columns.
Yeah.
Hanging
beams and stuff. Yeah. So here on the first floor we have the team that has been working on the project here sitting. This is our Philharmonic concert hall in Prague that we've been working on for at least a year now or so. Where the idea is essentially that you can almost you can arrive by boat and walk up, and then continue to walk up the roof plates here and make it to the very top where you can look out. And go down again. It's right on the riverfront in Prague, and will be a fantastic addition to Prague when it's finished.
And it's a pretty serious BIM model as well. Right?
It's a very serious BIM model. It has a high level of complexity and a lot of complex parts to it. So it was also a very tough competition with a lot of big architectural firms in the run-up. So we were extra happy to win this one, looking at the lineup of competitors we had. So very good project. And then there's a mix of other people, mix of other projects on this floor as well. And then here I think you can also just see how the whole concept of the building is that each floor switches so that you always have one transparent side, and then on the other side you have the mega shelf that sort of covers back of house stuff. So we have toilets behind there, we have a number of other things hidden behind the shelf that you don't see. But then on each floor it sort of goes back and forth like this.
So you got the patchwork going up.
Yeah.
Super nice.
So that's the principle. And then each floor has a little kitchenette to it as well, with coffee machines and so forth.
Save everyone walking up and down.
Yeah, there's a lot of walking upstairs here.
We're only on the first floor.
Yeah, exactly. And here you can see the beautiful natural stone that just stands completely raw cut from the quarry.
Wow.
Here on the second floor, we now have our model shop in the back there, and a project team sitting here on the side. And the aim for the headquarters here when we moved here was to really get the model shop out in the heart of the building and out in the open, because back in our previous office it was sort of hidden a little bit away in the background. So we really wanted to sort of get it out and get it more visible, because it's something we really sort of love and enjoy doing all these models. And as you can see, the 3D printers in the back there are just constantly running, almost 24/7, creating different prints and different things for the model making process.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we definitely saw, since I think when I joined in 2018, there wasn't as many.
No.
And then the workshops
It has scaled up quite a bit. So we sadly no longer have our robotic arm that we used to have in the previous office. We might get it back at some point, but that's the only thing we didn't bring from the old model shop. But apart from that, it's
Have you seen any other technology kind of? I remember some of the guys in New York were playing with hologram and augmented size, but
yeah, we have been playing a little bit around with hologram as well for model making. I know they're also doing that in London at the moment and so on. So, but it's not something we've been heavily adopting here, to be honest. But we are definitely always looking at different ways we can do things and how we can innovate the model making side of things as well. So on this side here, we also have our landscape team sitting, hence all the plants and greenery.
I didn't notice that until you said that.
No, exactly, but it's yeah. But yeah, they're doing a number of different landscape projects, the master plans and urban projects. Some of them are in relation to some of the projects we have that needs a landscape around. And sometimes they also do competitions and wins that are strictly landscape projects on its own, like without any buildings to it. So it's a bit of a combination.
It's really grown over the years, right? The landscape team. Very
much, and it's actually still growing a lot and so on. So it's a very positive part of the business for sure. It has been expanding and still is.
It's hard to BIM though, the landscape, but
I mean, we're getting there, at least on some of it. It still comes with its complexities, and Revit is still not there, and so on. But I think we're seeing at least a shift more and more away from AutoCAD. We're doing a lot more of the stuff in Rhino, and for instance, the hotel I showed downstairs as part of the master plan that we're working on. The team here did all the landscape of that hotel in Revit. So all the balconies and all the stuff that goes up and also the stuff around is done in Revit. So we are trying to do as much of it as we can, but it depends on the size, and then there's without going too deep right now, but there's
we'll save it for the
number of technical aspects of that. And then the lamps we have here is done by an artist studio called Studio Drift that made these lamps for our Spiral project in New York, the big skyscraper project, where they are placed in the lobby entrance. And then Bjarke is a good friend of the founders of Studio Drift, and then they came up with the idea of putting some of them here, and I think they fit the how to say space and the height of the space very well. So it's
like, are they called jellyfish lights?
Yeah, exactly. And it's just nice to have this sort of moving part to it as well.
Yeah.
So
that's super. I actually thought they were just for the party, but they're permanent.
No, I think they're at least on loan for semi-permanent. I think we might switch them out at some point, but yeah, we'll see.
Cool.
All right, so here on the third floor, we have one of the prime views of the building towards the city center. You have the Opera House, you have the Paper Island by Kobe. You can also actually see a little snippet of our ski slope.
Copenhill.
Sadly, it's sort of right behind the B&W halls, but you can see the chimney, and a little bit of it would have been nice if it was perfectly framed there, but that's how it is.
There's also you might not see this in this shot, but there's a water plane about to take off as well, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, we have this water plane that goes between Aarhus and Copenhagen a few times a day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
There's a cabin out there, isn't it, that Bigsters can...
Yeah, we have a small little cabin in relation to the master plan I showed earlier.
Yeah. So in theory, you could finish work, jump on the plane.
Yes, you could.
And go have a evening beer in the cabin.
Totally, and go back home next morning. Yeah, so here we have a collection of some of the products we're also designing ourselves. So we have a little product team on this floor that does a number of things, whether it's lamps or door handles and other things, furniture. And we generally like to sort of try and when we do a building to also contribute to it with custom furniture if we can and other things. So here's just a few examples of some of the work that the team have been doing over the years. And as you will also see in some of the meeting rooms and other places of the building, we also have a lot of our own furniture here. This is one we did lately for Co-Concept. Yeah, but the lamps in the meeting rooms and so on is all done by ourselves. Yeah.
And occasionally we get these as Christmas presents, right?
True. Yeah. Every now and then. It's not. You can't count on it, but
the Google lights, the Panda.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you come work at big, you might
get. We got the Panda a couple of years ago, and a couple and
yeah. So yeah, come work at big, you might get a little big gift for Christmas.
Right. So now we're on the 4th floor, where the floor is a mix of architectural teams and projects. And then our whole sort of administration department with HR, finance, legal, BizDev, etc.
Serious stuff.
A lot of serious stuff, but also a lot of good people. And then I guess this is also the perfect floor to just show this thing I talked about below, about this, you could say, optical illusion on the structural side of things, because this is where you can clearly see how the prefab TT decks are going towards the facade, where you would normally want to have a beam that sort of holds them up and catches them. And when you stand right here where we're right now, it sort of gives that complete look and feel of as if they're just floating.
Yeah. Just held up by nothing.
When you come up here the first time, you might not actually sort of notice it, but when you notice it, you might not then realize that it's just the mega beam above that they're hanging from. So it's a nice little, there's a tiny bracket on the back end of them that then is connected to the mega beam above. And there's actually also one of the big beams on the other side. It's sadly behind the shelf now, so you're not able to see it. But there's actually one of the big beams as well here that runs to the facade and then hangs from the facade.
Oh wow!
So there's a lot of very, very complicated structural details that we had to overcome with this project. It was by no means easy.
And then again, we got a column here.
Yeah, now we're on the we're in the marble section now of the building. So here you have a raw cut marble stone, and again it has this completely raw cut, direct from the quarry look and feel.
Super nice.
And then I think here it's also easy to. Sorry, not easy, but it's a good spot to also just quickly show that we have this combination of the emergency staircase coming down, but it also serves as a balcony in the day-to-day life in the building. And then each of the staircases has a little balcony that you can walk out to and sort of enjoy a bit of fresh air and sun. And then on the other side, you can also go out and get out to the actual emergency part of it. And then you can also just use that to go up and down in the sort of daytime. So a lot of bigsters are using it, especially when it gets a little bit warmer. Uses it to both leave the building and also, come into the building when they come in the morning. So
and also just take a break.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Right, so here we are on the 5th floor, where we have again a mix of project teams working on different a few different projects. Some projects in China, a project in Australia, and so on. And then in the very back down there, we have the first engineering team, then the sustainability team, and then we have the DT space or the DT team in the very back. We're sort of hidden a little bit away in the corner, but it's also nice to have a corner to sort of sit and geek out in. So it's
This is the most important floor. This is where DT is.
Yeah.
So for ATN, this is where we want to be.
Exactly. So let's head down there. So yeah, this is where we sit in the design technology team, with a combination of the BIM team on that side, and then our Vis people here in the middle, and then the computational unit sitting over there. There are normally 3 people, but 2 of them are off sick today. But yeah, this is where all the magic happens on the DT side of things. I'm sitting here myself. And then over here we also have our little sort of
the headsets.
Collection of headsets.
Actually, this is the first time I've seen the Vision Pro in real life.
Right. Okay, but here it is.
Wow.
So I thought I would put it up for the occasion today. I only just received it 3 days ago from our New York team. So we haven't started to really sort of play around with it yet. Ahmad on our New York side have already been playing around with it for a couple of months, and it's already deep into developing bespoke apps for us on it. So he's already showing some really good stuff.
We'll talk with him next month.
Perfect. But then I'm sure he will be able to show you a little bit more of the insights and bits and bobs of that. But you know, I've tried it the other day, also in the run up to our ATN Pechacucha. I filmed the deck that I was going to show through the Vision Pro, and it's incredibly detailed, and you know, there's no lag at all. So like the motion sickness that some people typically get, you just don't have that somehow. So yeah, definitely a prime product, I would say.
What about these guys? Can you talk about those? Or?
These are, I think, some prototype samples for a big pavilion we're doing, but I'm not sure about sort of the status of these ones. So, but I think we used them for an exhibition to sort of show this big pavilion that sort of can. I think actually they're supposed to be done out of mycelium, but. I would need to check with the team down there to be sure. As I mentioned earlier, so all the different floors also have different things behind the shelf. So in this case here we have a hidden meeting room. We sometimes refer to it as the Harry Potter room, and we have the printer rooms, and we have toilets and other things sort of all hidden behind the wooden shelf. And then it also acts as the we also have some of the mechanical ventilation sitting in sort of inside of it and behind it. So it serves many purposes, both as a display wall and displaying models, but also, you know, hiding things away and so on. So it's
both form and function.
Yeah.
Very fitting for big.
Yeah, exactly. So here we are on the 6th floor. Where we have this amazing view towards Öresund with the bridge to Sweden in the background, and yeah, just a nice sort of undisturbed view to the sea. This floor is currently still being sort of wrapped up. We're still doing a bit of construction work up here, but we're getting close to have it finished. And this floor will serve as a exhibition space, and you could say a VIP space as well, and a place where we can really bring clients up and curate different setups with models and other things. There's going to be a big meeting room in the back, some smaller ones in the very back, and then we have a kitchen as well we can use for catering and other purposes. And then we'll go to the rooftop terrace in a second that is connected to this space. And down there we have these 2 mega sliding doors that you can press a button and then they will open up and sort of make it one big space together with the rooftop.
You also do events, hosting and stuff like that.
Exactly. So we're definitely looking at using this for a lot of events and other things.
Next time we come, we'll bring Pechacucha.
Pechacucha could be this could be a perfect place for Pechacucha. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So. Over here is a little sort of a personal favorite of mine, and I know it's the same goes for you. You also showed it in episode 1.
I think this one you have way more though.
I think we have most of them here, but this is essentially a lot of different big projects at the same scale. So it's almost like a little sort of mini big world of projects. But I always love to come up here and sort of, you know, hold things up against each other and see like sort of how they compare in scale and so on. So it's a really nice wall of projects we have here. And I think you also quite quickly notice how big some of these projects are when you see them up close. It's especially when you compare them to some of the smaller ones. You can take our headquarter here and place it right next to the Spiral in New York, and you can see how
big
how that line up. You know, it's.
I think what I say is it looks like it's in scale order. So you go all the way down to the containers, the what are they called?
The urban riggers. Here.
Urban riggers.
Yeah.
And then it's sort of like growing from shelf to shelf to the big boy at the top. Yeah.
So this is the rooftop terrace of the 6th floor.
We made it. We made it to the top.
We made it to the top. And obviously we haven't, given that we moved in September last year, we haven't actually used this a whole lot yet because it's been so freezing cold and still is. But obviously we're looking very much forward to warmer times and summer times and where we can really enjoy this space and break out up here and have lunch and other things. So this is, as I mentioned earlier, inside a space where we can open up the two big doors and really make it one big room together with the rest of the floor inside. And then over here you have the great view we saw downstairs on the 3rd floor. You have this fantastic view over the city with all the spires, the Opera, Paper Island, the Copenhill ski slope in the back there, Cobus silo on that side.
Nordhaven, Coburg.
Yeah, there's a number of different projects you can spot from this angle. So
Nordhaven's really becoming like a bit of a hub for architects, right?
Oh yeah, totally. On this pier alone, we have we're out here at the very end, and then we have Wilhelm Lauritsen Architects as our neighbor. We have Kobe further down. There's also Gottlieb Paludan Architects. And a number of others in the close neighborhood. So there's a lot of, it's almost becoming an architectural ghetto. So now we're gonna go downstairs again, and we're gonna actually sort of make the whole tour down on the outside stair. So we're gonna see if you can follow us along, and then we'll just do
it quickly.
Do a one take. Yeah, it's freezing. So this is where it starts. This is the last stair coming up, where you again have a fantastic view over the northern part of Copenhagen and the sea out there and everything. So and right now you have the container terminal on that side, which will be moved away to another location. So that whole side over there is also going to be developed in the near future.
Very cool. There's so many different angles to the building.
Yeah. And then as we come down here, you can also see that we've made sure to cover the edges with a lot of different plant species. So hopefully in a few years' time, this will be fully grown over and be much more lush and green.
Yeah. Do we end up near that back door?
Yeah.
It's a fun little garden.
It has this new stone sculpture from a friend of Bjarke's from Burning Man.
I think that artist that does the cable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There we go.
Boom. Emergency exit and way home.
Balconies and everything.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Super great. My name is Jens Kaarsholm, and I'm the Director of Design Technology here at BIG in Copenhagen.
All right, Jens, thank you so much for the epic tour. Definitely the most floors we've ever covered so far. 6 floors and coming back down. Incredible space. I'm a little bit jealous I didn't get to work in this office.
It is incredible to sit here, I gotta say.
But now let's sit down and talk about some tech.
Yes.
Obviously, for those of you in the audience, this is the second time we featured BIG. Obviously, I talked a little bit about DT back in London. So I cover the basics in that. And so for those in the audience, go back and watch that and then come back. But for you, I think we can touch on some other parts that I didn't touch on.
Right.
And also maybe to begin with is to talk a bit about your background, because you got quite an interesting link to BIG. You were initially an intern in the early days of BIG.
Yes.
Then you went on a side quest to other firms. You worked
Right.
for Foster's for a bit, and then you came back.
Yes.
So maybe talk the audience through that journey.
Yeah, so I joined BIG as an intern back in 2009, 2010, around that time, and had a half year sort of official stay, and then I stayed a couple of months, almost a year afterwards as well. So the total stay was about a year. And initially I was sort of brought in as an intern to actually try and see if we could get some Revit models going for some of the projects. As most of you might know, Revit back then weren't the nicest tool for complex shapes. So we didn't fully succeed at the time, but we did actually get it going on a few things. And I actually managed to do this tiny little pavilion, square inch pavilion out at our project Superkilen, a very famous urban project we did back then.
Yeah, the famous big park with the
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there is this red and white striped square inch pavilion that does not look like a big project in its design, but and the story behind that one was that actually it was a neighbor to the park out there who sort of requested to have a square inch pavilion as part of the you know, everyone could sort of put in requests for features from their nationality to the bigger project. And then this lady had requested a square inch pavilion, and the only thing we had back then was just a photo of her of the original pavilion in the US. And then we knew that the person standing next to one of the columns was 190 in height, and that's what I had to sort of model and draw it from.
Oh, wow.
But a fun little project, and it might be the first Revit project at BIG, you know, in general.
Yeah, so and that was in 2009. Was that before the kind of Carlsberg office?
Yeah, so back then we were located in Nørrebro, and we were only about 60 people at the time, so it was completely different. We had no international offices, and most of the projects were in Denmark, and it was a very different office at the time, and it's fun to think of that time, and then sort of, especially when you then come back like I did 8 years later, and when I came back we were roughly 600 people globally, so you know, quite a crazy expansion over the years, but it was fantastic to come back and realize that although the office had changed, the spirit and the sort of yes is more attitude was still here, and is very much still to this day, I think. So it was good. Yeah,
good times.
Yeah.
So the audience has a bit of an idea of how DT works from our first episode.
Yep.
But maybe let's talk about your role as a director, because obviously you're working here in Copenhagen, but we're also always connected to all the other offices. And also the DT team here in Copenhagen, you do have a bit more of computational firepower. You've got a good BIM team, and you've also got a bit of the immersive Viz world.
Yeah, so I think we, as you said, we have a fairly large team here in Copenhagen that mostly serves Copenhagen. Some of them also works on what we could call, global projects, which can be development projects like a ribbon for Rhino or ribbon for Revit and so forth. BIM-wise, we typically try and stick to one BIMster per 75 BIGsters. So the BIM teams, whether you go to London or New York or whatever, is roughly the same size if you measure number of BIGsters. And we do have a few computational designers here that are specifically on computational design that they might not have in the same way in the other offices. And yeah, then we have one full-time visualizer sitting doing classical Viz work, and then we also have been looking into a lot of immersive stuff with, you know, Unreal and the likes, and a bit of Unity and so on. So
yeah, which we'll get into that.
And then in case of my role, obviously I'm looking after these people locally in Copenhagen, so I'm overseeing the local office, and I'm the line manager for these people. Then I also help the local office here in terms of questions and you know, all sorts of things that might end up on my table in the end, or when it filters through the organization, then if it's tech related, it typically lands on my table to deal with. But then obviously I also have a role in trying to align the global offices and how we do things and coordinate things between Jan, our director of BIM in New York, and others like yourself when you're around before you left.
Yeah, and it's kind of a nice way because each office is kind of solving their own problems. Yeah. Project-wise, but we were always like very connected and sharing what we know between the offices and.
Yeah, there was a great deal of support between the offices in terms of workflows and what we do and helping out and it's really good. I think there's a very positive vibe within the DT team. So
that's definitely what I miss.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
I know when you came back to Big in 2018, you came back as like the BIM manager of Copenhagen office. Which was a very unique time, right? Because as you've talked about before, when we were standing on the models, BIM Copenhagen was originally an ArchiCAD firm.
Yeah, at least for a couple of years, we were ArchiCAD based in Copenhagen.
And then you were coming on to become the BIM manager and transition the company from ArchiCAD to Revit. So maybe explain a little bit about that process and how that came about.
Yeah, so actually already when I was at Foster's, I did have a conversation with Big because I always kind of knew that I wanted to go back to Copenhagen eventually. And then Big did reach out at some point, and we were having talks around coming back. Initially, the idea was for me to come in and lead the Revit side of the business because they were still using Revit a bit as well on the side. And then the other guy who used to be here should then sort of lead the ArchiCAD side of the business. But I kind of told them back then that in my opinion, wouldn't work. And that sort of had to make up their mind for one or the other, that I just couldn't see myself in a hybrid system or hybrid platform setup. And then luckily, 1 year later, they did decide to go full on Revit and that happened to be right around the same time where now my wife, but my girlfriend back then that I found back in Copenhagen, decided to try and pull me back home. So it became sort of perfect timing. So I had a short stay at Architema, but then when Big phoned me up, I was like I had to go for it. It was just meant to be somehow. I felt it was
It was a big challenge because you had to kind of like you said, the product we were talking about downstairs, you made that bold choice to literally rebuild the building and everything. To transition to Revit. So
I think that building was probably the hardest choice we had to deal with at the time because it was right around when we joined and but obviously having a few years before that I was at Foster's for 3 years and was part of the very early BIM team that joined, or the very first BIM people that joined the company and not that I was leading the implementation per se, but at least I was very much part of that core group who you could say rolled out BIM at Foster's. So I was kind of used to this whole thing about convincing people, or not convincing, but like this whole idea of you need to get people to shift from one mindset to another mindset, or one tool to another tool, and obviously also a lot of the learnings that I took with me from Foster's was something I could use here and apply here. So I wouldn't say that we copied in any way the setup we had at Foster's, because they also do a number of things differently to what we do here. So it wasn't like I could just take whatever we did at Foster's and apply it one-to-one. But there were certainly a lot of the learnings from that transition at Foster's that I could bring with me and apply here as well. And also, do things we learned that didn't work, and then do it differently here as well. So that it was an interesting process, I would say, and I think we've succeeded in making the transition. We're fully up and running. We haven't missed a deadline, at least not due to any BIM issues or Revit issues. And as I showed at the Pechikucha last night, I think the breadth of complex BIM models we've cranked out over the years is just showing that we're on a good path, I think.
BIM has always been pretty solid. Now with the New York office delivering massive projects, you guys, and now London and Barcelona can build on top of that.
Exactly, and I think also a lot of the stuff we've been working on is also the whole, you could say, the alignment between offices, and not that we're doing everything completely the same, but there's just a lot more talk between the offices going on, and as we talked about before, like this whole vibe there is within the global DT team. So yeah, I think our setup nowadays is rock solid, I think. Yeah.
I mean, talking about BIM, I know you've, and a really important topic to you at the moment is real world BIM.
Yeah.
And, you know, this world we live in, the tools are currently not quite delivering the true promise of BIM. And we also live in this world of what we've been calling BIMification, like an over-BIMification of stuff. These like thousands of ISO standards and standards in all these different places. Yeah. What's your view on the future of BIM and how we might improve the tools, but also like this bureaucracy and what's the word for it? Methodologies that we're putting it into practice?
I think there's definitely a lot of stuff happening right now. There's a number of different startup firms coming out of the shadows that are working on all sorts of new BIM tools. A lot of them partly because we did all these, there was all these letters to Autodesk a couple of years back in 2020 and later, which I was also heavily involved in, or at least behind the scenes on some of it. So I've also been very much involved in the whole conversation and a lot of these different discussions, both with Autodesk, and I'm also now talking to a number of other of these startup firms. And I think we're definitely seeing both a lot of positive change within Autodesk on this, and we're also seeing a lot of these firms that are now coming out, as mentioned. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening, and I'm more positive now in regards to that than I used to be. So at least things are changing, which is great. In terms of the whole bureaucracy thing, I think that's almost the opposite. I think that goes in the wrong direction at the moment, and I think we as an industry, we have a tendency to overcomplicate things at the moment. We are constantly coming out with new standards, new paperwork, new things we have to deal with, new regulation around certain topics and things. And some of it might be for the better. And I'm not strictly saying that I'm against the ISO standards, for instance. I do think that certain standards are great, because if we can all work more or less the same way, then that's great. But I think where the chain typically falls off is when you see, we have quite often see projects that are coming in where you can clearly see there was a BIM consultant on the project on the client side that just needed to generate a lot of work for himself and ended up just like writing page over page over page on all sorts of requirements that you need to comply with. We've seen, I think the craziest I've seen was a set of BIM requirements on 400 pages. That literally included every single possible standard you could come up with, even standards that would supersede other standards, and to a point where it just gets ridiculous, and to a point where you're never going to be able to comply with it. So you just know from the get-go that they're going to come after you, because then you're not compliant here, or you're not compliant there, or you're not, and sadly, I think we see that actually more and more, where I'm kind of missing the more sort of rational thinking and the more sort of like pragmatic approach to this. I actually do think that in Denmark we have a very pragmatic framework around ICT and BIM. And I guess partly also to do with the fact that we were actually the first country in the world to roll out a BIM mandate back in 2007.
Right.
So I think that means that the whole thinking around BIM has matured over a lot of years now, and I think even though some would say our framework might be somewhat simple, but it also means that a lot of the firms are used to it, and there's just a great deal of trust between firms, because we know how this framework works and so on. So I think there's a lot of people that are slightly skeptical about the new ISO coming in, and how will that affect the Danish framework and so on.
Is there any kind of indications of things that you see both in the tools of future BIM, for example? Like I see a lot of these new tools are on the cloud, so they're like web-based.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, everyone claims to be AI driven,
Yeah,
but
you almost have to.
yeah. Is there any like little flavors of this one is kind of doing something interesting in this, or like topics? Is it cloud-based or?
Yeah, I think it seems like everything is going to the cloud these days, and for good reasons. Obviously, cloud also means that it gets harder to do stuff offline.
Yeah.
I guess that's the only big downside of the cloud, you could say. But not that that's a huge issue for us, I think. But yeah, it seems like most things are going to the cloud and browser-based and so on. And I think some of it actually might be fine. I do think that we might need some of these sort of, you could say, hybrids where you have a little bit of a tool sitting on your computer that runs
like
or spins off a desktop. It's a smaller desktop version of certain tools, but I think especially also with a lot of the AI stuff coming in, I think I'm super keen to see when we can get going with AI-driven documentation, for instance. And I'm sure it's going to come both in Revit and other toolings soon. Like it's not soon, but like I definitely think that this will be the next big thing for the companies to attack. So we can get rid of having to sit and click 1,000 times to apply dimensions and just have it like auto dimension, and then we can spend our time checking whether the dimensions are lined up correctly. So
also on the standard side, have you also seen anything that shows improvements in this? For example, people are training ChatGPTs, specific GPTs on these things, and maybe you could throw these contracts in and
I think we will definitely get there. I think we're already seeing like companies, companies. We're already seeing sort of movements towards, for instance, in Denmark, we have this company called Molio that takes care of all the frameworks and all the standards and so on. They're working on an AI-based sort of GPT that will read the Danish building regulations and where you can ask stuff about building regulations. Obviously, I think in the context of that and standards, the question mark will be like, how do you then deal with the licensing of these standards, and how can I'm sure they can work that out, but that will be the I guess the only sort of blocking stone to this. Like, how do you deal with licensing to all these standards and so on? But I gave a talk in London last year at Next Build about this rising bureaucracy, overcomplication of things and so on. And one of the slides I had there was showing all these different standards from a specific project that was lined up. And on the slide, I tried to sort of then take all the page numbers, or like the amount of pages per standard, and sort of made a sum in the end. And I think the total was 4,000 something pages, and it would take someone 30 hours to read if you took like an average like person's reading speed. So obviously back then we joked about afterwards like that it would be amazing if you could just like shove all those standards into an AI model and have it sort of dissected completely, and then just you could then say, tell me what's in it for me when it comes to quantification, or where do we need to look out for this and that, instead of having to read for 30 hours. And I think we're getting very close to that. So I think that's going to be a very welcoming hack to to standards.
So I know you're a big fan of gamification, game engines, Unreal. I think this was an area we were both very excited about. Developing further big. And of course, your infamous Counter-Strike experiment with this place was went we could say semi-viral in the architecture world. And I know now you got Fortnite and all this kind of stuff to kind of continue that idea. But what excites you about game engines for architecture and
Well, I think it's when I remember when I first graduated back in 2012, I sat with a friend of mine back then, and we sort of sat there and talked about the future and tools and other things. And then I sort of said to him back then that the moment the game industry and the movie industry, at least the tech side of it, starts to merge with the AC industry, that's when it's going to get really interesting. And back then we weren't really at that point. Enscape was not even a thing back then, and game engines weren't really, at least not something you mentioned in an AC context. But I just back then had a feeling that it would come somehow, and there were already sort of indicators that it was going that direction. And I think we've been at that point now where they have been to a degree merging for a while now, or at least for a few years, and we see it more and more. And obviously with Unity and Unreal being the two big players in that field, that opens up so many ways of doing things. And I think the entry point to go from an architectural model to a game is so low now. Like it's so straightforward to go and do that. Obviously, the Counter-Strike example you brought up was actually a little bit more tricky because it was not. I didn't go through Unreal or Unity. I went for a very old school 3ds Max pipeline. FBX 3ds Max, used a plugin for 3ds Max to get it going, and we it's the building we're sitting in, and the map I made was a 1-to-1. So the geometry that came from Revit was sitting 1-to-1 inside the map, which is essentially the model we also used to pour the concrete out of. And I did not scale it up or down, so it was in many ways the real world sitting inside Counter-Strike 1-to-1. I didn't realize, but when I started doing it, that a person in Counter-Strike is 180 in height. I didn't realize that it was actually sort of scaled correctly to the real world. So it was, and I ever since I did that during COVID and so on, I've just, really liked this idea of bringing the real world inside a game and play it and walk around it and obviously, a lot of people here and surely in many other firms have been playing with real-time tools for years now with Enscape and Lumion and others, and we are also heavy Enscape users here. And already that is makes you feel like you're running around inside a computer game at times, at least. So it's definitely something that I'm still very interested in, and I'm still trying to find the good use case for applying it on a more sort of serious basis and a serious project, or finding the right client that could really get excited about it. And I do think there is some interesting prospects for doing it, like museums where you could potentially, have a virtual museum on a website with pixel streaming, where you could walk around and check out the museum if you're not able to go there yourself in person. And there could be a number of other things where it really could make sense to gamify it and make use of these things. And it's just and then if you also take XR and VR into that mix, that makes it just even more exciting to immerse yourself in these things. And I still have this dream of mine. We haven't got to do it yet, but we talked about the models upstairs with a little big world of models in scale, and I still have this dream of making a big downtown, big world where we line up all the different projects in a little downtown style, where you can just walk around and immerse yourself with all the projects and really again get that feeling of being there with them in scale. So that might be a thing we're going to work on at some point. But
so we got mini big world, but we could have a virtual big world.
Yeah, and then maybe you can imagine having like this configurator where you can walk up and then you can say, I want to have big headquarter on this side and I want to have the spiral or something else on the other side, and they will just pop up and you can stand there and walk around them and maybe not walk inside. Maybe that would be a bit too much to having to texturize and so on. But like it could be a fun one to pursue.
I think also your Counter-Strike example was sort of like a very early fun idea of maybe a digital twin, because the thing that is unique about this building is we designed it as big, but you guys now live in it, so that model could live on you know, I know a lot of people talk about digital twins, but
Yeah.
you can have virtual meeting rooms, or, you know,
Yeah.
track the performance of the building or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the problem with the Counter-Strike one is that they changed Counter-Strike now, or they released a new version, so the map is no longer working. So it used to be live on
right.
big.dk, so everyone could go to the browser and actually play the map. But sadly, it's no longer functioning.
You have to convert it into.
I have to get my head around
it into Fortnite for everyone.
I have been looking at that, and I am still tinkering with that as a little side project, but I just haven't had the time to finish it. I did make a teaser on LinkedIn at some point about it, and I have got the headquarter model into Fortnite, but I'm just having some compiling issues at the moment that I'm still trying to get my head around. So
stay tuned.
One day,
stay tuned.
If COVID comes again, I'll find time for it.
Yeah, we need another pandemic. As we've been doing these tours, of course, we've got to talk to everyone about AI. Again, I know I talked a little bit about how we've been experimenting with AI at Big over the last few years.
Yeah.
I know things have developed a little bit further recently, but maybe touch on if we're using it in any new way, but also your general thoughts on AI, whether it's BIM or, you know, this world of diffusion or ChatGPT.
Yeah. Well, I think it's you know, as you're saying, it's hard to avoid it these days, and I definitely think it's an area that just is extremely interesting. I must say, in the beginning, when I first started looking at some of the Midjourney stuff, that I was super impressed by it, but I also a little bit back then at least found it hard to see how that could slot into our process. And I think we're also, at least here, we're trying to be very careful about not letting ourselves be sort of driven by whether it's Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or others, but like we don't want to all of a sudden become like a Midjourney architecture firm. So we want to sort of make sure that the AI tools are aiding our design process or supporting it as a tool, but without sort of driving it. I think that's very important for us. But I think now that you're seeing, like with Stable Diffusion, like how much control you now have on actually making sure that your design stays as is, and then the rest gets rendered or gets, you know, populated or whatever happens in that way. I think it's really showing its promise now, and we're already actually using. We've been using AI for a while now for mood boards and for ideas and inspiration and so on. But we're seeing an increase now in, for instance, our visualizer can use it to cut out things from the scene, and then Photoshop it into his own scene. We're also we have been doing a video where we play some stone sculptures that were actually just 3D prompted stone sculptures that we just prompted and placed, and then we drizzled a little bit of snow on top, and they just look incredible, you know. And you know, instead of sitting there and searching the web for stone sculptures that would fit, we could just sit and easily prompt whatever, and then once we're happy with it, we could just very easily bring it in, and stuff like that is just super interesting. And I think we're gonna definitely see more and more of that. And then, as mentioned before, I think the whole also documentation, the less sexy side of AI is definitely also something that I personally is very hyped about, and I can't wait to sort of see when that comes around. I see a huge potential in AI for classification, for metadata, for data in general on models, BIM models and the likes. And for documentation in general, for drawing production, and so many things. Like I really think it has a huge promise for a lot of the more sort of repetitive, tedious tasks that you sometimes have to deal with.
The less sexy stuff, but that's like it's a reoccurring theme as well. It's not. I think there's this fear AI is taking over as the designer, but it's really where it gets really interesting. You use it as like a super assistant or like a superpower.
I still, you know, I know there's a lot of people saying, it's going to take over and the whole profession will die. I certainly don't think that's the case. And at least right now, I just find it very, very hard to believe that would ever be the case. I'm sure it's going to take over a lot of things, but hopefully that will just leave us with more time to design and do great designs and buildings, and which should be the aim for it. So I don't think we'll be out of profession or out of work in anytime soon. I'm not one of the doomsday AI thinkers, at least.
That's a good way to end on the AI chat. Another question we've been asking everyone is for maybe young architects in the audience that want to come and join big and be part of the DT team. What do you look for, and what advice do you give to someone that might be interested in that?
I think as a general advice, and this would not go for only just joining the DT team, it would just go for anyone. I would always urge and advise people to join a practice, whether it's big or any other practice really. But I would any day urge people to join somewhere and then or join someone and then really try and see a project through from start to the end. And maybe not just one, but like a couple of projects where you really get that feeling and the understanding of how a project timeline looks like. What are the challenges in an early phase, in a later phase, and even when you get on site and construction. I'm not saying that you have to follow it through to the very, very completion date, like but at least into the CD construction documents phase of things, and then from there on you can decide as a designer, as an architect, whether you want to focus your efforts on the early stage or whether you want to focus your efforts on being a really good later phase documentation kind of a person, or if you more technical person, or if you want to go more into the tech DT domain. So I think that's really a key advice from my point of view, and also something that I've done myself. I've been doing a number of projects before going where I ended up going. I always knew that I wanted to go in the BIM direction and tech direction from the get-go, so that was always a focus of mine. But I was also very focused on making sure that I tried all the phases. So I sort of had that as you could say foundation for my future decisions and whatever. And I still, to this day, when I sit in meetings with big clients nowadays, I can still sometimes pull on some of the experience I got from previous projects, being in those later phases, so it even stuff that I did 10 years ago, it proves valuable to today.
Understanding that full process. Right?
But then obviously if you want to join the DT side of things, I would definitely, again, depending on what sort of role you're looking for, if you're more a BIM person, coding might not be such an important matter. But a bit of coding experience is obviously always great, whether you're sitting in Rhino, whether you're sitting in Dynamo, or whether you're sitting in Grasshopper, or something more agnostic. Then there would still be a good thing to know about. But then, at least in the case of us, given that we're so heavily Rhino and Revit based, having a little bit of an understanding of both of the tools is almost a requirement. Yeah.
Our other final question we always ask everyone, 2024, there's so much going on in the tech side of things. There's AI, FOMO, game engines, 3D printing, robotics, all this kind of stuff. Is there anything you are particularly excited for on the horizon?
I think the whole gamification, game engines, real-time rendering, that side of things is still going to be something that I'm always going to be excited about. Having been a big computer gamer in my previous life, I'm not gaming that much anymore, but I used to game a lot. So I think that will always stick to me somehow. Obviously, I'm also super excited about AI, but I'm maybe not one of those that are like extremely hyped. Like I'm not, I'm hyped about it, but in a more sort of relaxed way. I'm following quite closely what's going on, but I'm not sort of one of those that are setting fire to my hair in excitement over it in that sense. But those things. I think it's an interesting time to be in AC at the moment. Like there's a lot of stuff happening. There's a lot of companies coming to market. There's the whole talk about BIM 2.0 and how that's gonna affect things. And I think this shift we will see in the coming years of new tools, new programs, old programs that are starting to realize that they now have to talk to the new tools, and you know, the whole change of dynamics in the AC field within tools and so on is super exciting, and I can't wait to see how it all plays out. I'm under NDA with a number of different firms, so I do know at least a bit of where things are going, but I still, even when I, you know, having that knowledge that I do have, I still don't really have the full picture of where this will, or how this will play out. So I think it's exciting times in that sense.
Yeah, I do think it's exciting times. I think it's true that like there's a lot of FOMO around AI, but actually there's also, like last year Unreal, there was so many cool things that were going on and developing, but everyone was kind of FOMOing over AI.
Yeah, and also now with Unity and the Vision Pro and you know, there's just a lot of interesting things happening. And it's gonna be fun to follow.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us on this amazing tour. I'm blown away by seeing the headquarters. It's the first time I've seen it in daylight. Huge thank you to Jens and the big team for having us in and showing us around. As always, if you like this episode, give us a like and a subscribe. The more people that support it, the more offices we can get into. So thank you for your support so far, and we'll see you in the next episode.